There's one thing that if you're watching this video, you have experienced in the past, you will experience in the future, and you could even be experiencing as you're watching this video. And that is obstacles will be coming in your life, whether you like it or not. But how you choose to see these obstacles will really be the foundation of your life experience because it's not things that upset us, but it's our perception of things that upset us. And that's the first lesson that I want to dive into from one of the best books that I've ever read in my life, and that is Obstacle is the Way. A few years ago, I got perspective tattooed on my arm because this was one of the most powerful lessons that I ever learned in my life. I grew up feeling like life was happening to me, and that perspective was the exact thing that kept me where I was for so long of my life. I lost my father, my uncle, both at 37 years old, and I lost my grandfather a few months before his retirement. Growing up, I saw this as life pushing me down, not allowing me to actually have father figures or mentors in my life. And it wasn't until I stopped asking, why is this happening to me? And I started asking, how is this happening for me? That my life started to change. Nothing outwardly has changed, but my perspective of what has happened outwardly has changed. And that is what is always within my control, what is always within your control. But a lot of the time, we don't put that into perspective. And so we let life push us around because we never take perspective into our own hands and respond accordingly. We just go through life acting as though we have no say in how we respond to things. But how we choose to see and interpret the obstacles that are going to come in our life will be the foundation for the life that we create for ourselves. Here's the reality of it. Outward appearances are deceptive, and what's really beneath them, what's within them, is what really truly matters. Because when you look at the end of your life, there's going to be a few core things that happen in your life. And most likely, those things are going to be the things that you saw as bad when it happened to you. But if I were to ask you, if something bad were to happen to you today and it led to something amazing for you 5, 10 years in the future, would you still consider it bad? Likely your answer is no. And that's because you were able to change your perspective on something once you were able to see what could come from it. And in the moment when these negative things or these obstacles show up in our life, we can't see what's going to come from it. And so that's when we need to start asking ourselves better questions and start seeing these challenges that come up in our life through a different lens and from a different angle, and maybe even from a completely different perspective from someone else's perspective. Because most of the time, when we are dealing with problems in our life, we're way too close to those problems. And so the first step to overcoming any single problem that you are going to deal with in your life is to recognize that the one thing that is always within your control is your perspective of the problem. And a negative perspective will never help you with that problem. It will never help you actually get something from the problem that you see as a problem if you always see it as a problem. And once you start seeing them as opportunities and life presenting you with another opportunity to become a better version of yourself, you will start to move forward and start seeing these obstacles as opportunities. But if you always act as though that perspective and your attitude towards things is out of your control, well, you will continue to let life push you around when the one thing that is within your control is your perspective. And that leads me to number two, which is the second thing within your control, and that is action. Just because you don't feel ready or the conditions aren't to your liking doesn't mean that it's not up to you. A mindset that I've lived life by for a long time is that it may not be my fault, but it definitely is still my responsibility. We've all heard the quote, when nothing changes, nothing changes. So if you want something to change, you need to change the way that you see the challenge and the way that you approach that challenge. Once we've got our perspective under our control, then it's up to us to take the action to actually make a change. Because when nothing else can help you, the one thing that will always help you is staying in motion. Because it's really hard to overthink when you're taking so much action. This leads me to the third lesson. And this is another one that I got tattooed on my body, and that is amor fati, or love your fate. This means not to merely bear what is necessary, but to love it. And the way that I see this is to embrace every challenge, every single thing that you wish didn't happen in your life as a part of life, an amazing part of life, whether it be good or bad. It is a part of your journey, and to love it as an essential part of life is the only approach that is actually conductive to your growth. We can see them as things that happen to us, that happen against us, but choosing to see it as something that happens for us to help us become the best version of ourselves, to create the best life that we can create for ourselves, that is the only thing that is actually going to help you. And again, you get to choose your perspective. You get to choose the way that you see things. You get to choose the way that you approach life. Life can be this scary thing that is always presenting you with obstacles and things to overcome, or you can see it through a completely different lens and the same exact things can be happening to you, but yet you get something from it instead of it taking something from you. And I think that's the real core perspective shift that I think was really big for me in reading this book. The obstacles that were in my life, I thought were the exact thing that were keeping me from getting to where I wanted to go in my life. But when I got through this book and I really started implementing some of these things, it really helped me realize that they were the exact thing that prepared me to create the kind of life that I wanted to create for myself by helping me become the kind of person that I needed to be to create that kind of life. Truth of it is life is always asking you what you want, and your responses are your answers. This leads me to number 4, and this is another one I got tattooed on my body, and that is memento mori, or to remember your death. You could leave life right now, and you should let that determine what you do, you say, and you think. As I said earlier, I lost a lot of family growing up. And it's one of the things that you can't really conceptualize. We don't know what happens after death. And so, how can we ever really conceive what it means to pass away? I don't think we really can. And that's why most people go through life living as though they're not going to die, even though they know that they're going to, but they can't really internalize it. And so we care about what other people think of us. We play safe in a job that we don't love. We stay in a relationship that we know isn't for us. We do a lot of things that are not in our best interest. And that's because we don't really internalize the fact that we are going to die. And I think this core remembrance of death is one of the most powerful things that can help us change our perspective on our obstacles, help us move past them a little bit quicker, and help us really take initiative on the life that we want to create for ourselves because we know that this life is fleeting. This leads me to the last lesson, and that is to practice objectivity. This pretty much means to take the you out of the equation. Because if you were to take your situation and pretend it wasn't happening to you, that it's not important and it doesn't matter, how much easier would it be to overcome that exact problem? I mean, we've all experienced this when we have a problem that we're dealing with, and is when we're dealing with it, we have no direction, we have no idea how to overcome it. But if your best friend was dealing with that exact same problem, you would have advice for them almost automatically. And that's because you are out of the situation. And think about how many things that you could overcome in your life if you were able to take yourself out of the situation and to act as though it wasn't happening to you. Because as I stated earlier, most of the time we are way too close to our problems. So how could we overcome them if we're so close to them and we're not able to take a different perspective? Well, we have to practice objectivity and recognize that if this wasn't happening to me, I'd almost always have a solution to it. And so, practicing that in your everyday life, imagine how simple it would be to overcome these problems. And notice how I said simple, not easy. That is the core of this book, I really believe, is a lot of this is simple stuff. It's simple shifts to make in your life, but it's not easy. It's really difficult to take responsibility for your perspective, to take responsibility for the action that you need to take responsibility for the things that seemingly are out of your control, but are really the only things that are within your control. I think that's one of the most difficult things because once we've taken responsibility and we know that it's up to us, well, then we have no one else to blame. And then these obstacles really are opportunities, but that means the work starts there, not when we've understood that it's actually an opportunity. Once we've started to take action in making it an opportunity. But there are so many other lessons that I've got from this book. I think it's one of the most powerful books that I think every single person should read in their life because most people are going through life with their perspective seemingly out of their control, letting life throw them around. When this book can be the exact thing that lets you see life through such an empowering lens. Everything that is happening to you in your life could be for your benefit if you see it through that lens and you take action as though it is. If you liked this video, comment below and let me know if there's any other books that you'd like me to dive into.